I promised myself that no matter what the temptation, I would not get down into the gutter of personal attack. And I will keep that promise. I will tell you only that my co-counsel in the Simpson case, Gerald Ullman, was a man who prayed to God every single day. And the idea of attacking lawyers because of the clients that they represent simply reminds one of a period of time only 50 years ago where that was a very important part of America. It's one thing to accuse me of misquoting Joe Lieberman, who was misquoting George Washington, and I'm not sure who was right on that one, but to misquote me right in your presence really takes chutzpah. I have to tell you, did anybody hear me turn to Dr. Keyes and say to him, I want you to give up your faith in God? That's the last thing I would ever suggest. Keep your faith in God. Try to convert me. Try to proselytize. I have no fear of you. I have no fear of the Baptists who are trying to convert the Jews. The only time I fear religion is when it has the power of the state behind it. That's what led to the Inquisition and the Crusades. As long as this is an exchange of ideas, keep up your belief, keep up your faith, but don't make us think that the only people who died in the civil rights movement were people who came from the churches. Schwerner and Goodman, who died to support the rights of a race not even their own, gave up their lives not in the name of religion, but in the name of civil liberties and civil rights without religion at all. And I can name you dozens and dozens of others. I have a poster in my home of Ben Shahn listing the names of the heroes of the civil rights movement. Some were religious, some were not. But don't claim an exclusivity. That's my criticism. Believe what you want. Look to whom you want for salvation. But don't tolerate us merely. Don't say it's okay what you do, but we are the dominant group. We are the ones who are in the light of the framers. We are the ones who are right. We will tolerate you. You want to quote George Washington? I don't think George Washington was right when he said this, but the first thing, but George Washington also wrote to the synagogue in Truro and said, of toleration we will speak no longer, as if by the sufferance of one group, another group is allowed to survive in this country. All are created equal. And they're not created equal because of God. They're created equal because that is the kind of country we have chosen to live in. All men and women are not created equal in Iran. All men and women are not created equal in many churches where women cannot aspire to leadership in those churches. So equality was not an aspect of religion. You talk about the slaves who invoke God's will, and you forget to remind us that the slave owners also invoked God's will. Read the literature of religious slave ownership. They can quote the Bible as reliably as you can. The Bible can be quoted for virtually any proposition, certainly those dealing with slavery and freedom. There's a wonderful Hasidic story of an old Rebbe in Poland, and a man came over to him and said, you say never to say anything bad about anybody because it's a sin in Jewish law to engage in lashon hara, bad words. He said, but I bet I can come up with somebody that you can't say a good word about. And the rabbi said, who? And he said, atheists. And the rabbi said, no. There's one time in your life when it's very important to be an atheist. The student was shocked for the rabbi to say it's important to be an atheist. When? He said, when a poor person comes to you for charity, act as if there is no God. Act as if you are the only person on the face of the earth who can save that poor human being. And give him charity, not because God wants you to give him charity, but because that's the right thing to do. And I am suggesting to you that doing the right thing because it is the right thing is even more moral than doing it because someone more powerful than you told you to do it.
If you have a question and have written the question on an index card, please hold it up, and our ushers will filter out and grab as many as they can, and our team will begin to filter them. Dr. Bonchek?
Do you think that an atheist is qualified to be President of the United States, a member of the United States Supreme Court, a university president of a liberal arts college, or serve in other leadership roles where morality is essential?
What I find interesting is that you ask questions that, in the abstract, that can only be answered in the particular. I have met decent folks who don't believe in God. And that's why I think Washington said we must indulge with caution the supposition that you can't support religion without morality. I would not, however, wish as a matter of social justice to rely on this possibility. And that's what we're dealing with here, and what you don't want to see. You wish to speak to us as if what we're debating is the possibility of individual human goodness and morality, and that's not the issue. The issue is, on what reliable ground can we base social justice and those things which are required in order to sustain the claims of the powerless in the face of the temptations of power? And you refuse to answer that question. And that being the case, you ask me how I would cast my vote for an abstract individual, and I will tell you quite honestly, I don't owe you that explanation, and I shan't give it to you. It's not your business how I cast my secret ballot. That's why it's secret. But I'll tell you something else. I have been throughout my political career, and I am always careful to couch these arguments of morality in such a way that any individual of decent conscience can work hand in hand with me for the sake of those things that will strengthen the fabric of our morality and decency. I exclude no one and work with everyone who is willing to join with me in standing on those principles of decency, beginning with the American principle that we are all of us created equal and endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. And unlike Mr. Dershowitz, our founders did not exclude the Iranians and the Iraqis or anybody else who might be oppressed. They embraced in the purview of their universal conception all human beings, all those who were encompassed in our humanity under the rubric of God's will. And I will not retreat from that universal claim of justice.
But you also won't answer my question. It's a complete cop-out to say you won't tell us about your secret vote. Mr. Keyes, you ran for President of the United States. Had you won, you would have had to make Supreme Court appointments. You cannot duck this question. Had you been President of the United States and a qualified atheist had been put on the list, a man who absolutely and categorically says, I know with certainty, with as much certainty that you know that God exists, I know that God does not exist, would you have disqualified or would you have nominated that person to the Supreme Court? You can't wiggle out of that question.
Alan, do you know the interesting thing? This is, by the way, the reason that I would not trust Mr. Dershowitz to be the guarantor of my rights. See? Because in point of fact, I do have the right to wriggle out of that question if I feel like it. And that is why we have a secret ballot.
And pay the consequences.
Excuse me. If I put into your hands the power to dictate what shall be my choices and my conscience, then you will, as you are trying to do, abuse that power in order to coerce me into accepting your domination. Hold on, wait.
You think that's not a fair question?
I'm supposed to have 2 minutes uninterrupted, I thought, by you.
Go ahead.
Wait,
Second point. Now, I think we're seeing a clear illustration, because the same thing that you say, I can't duck this question and that, I suppose you believe I can't duck either your requirement that I should accept what the Bible tells me is wrong. Sexual activities that the Bible believes are wrong. You believe that the state has the right coercively to dictate conscience on these points, and under a civil rights rubric, force us to accept what is contrary to our religious conscience. You would trample on my rights in the general society, even as you would seek to trample on them here. But I would have to tell you this, though. There's an easy answer to your question. I wasn't, in point of fact. The only reason I'm pretending to duck it right now is so that I can make a point about your high-handedness. But the truth of the matter is that anybody who knows me knows the answer to your question. I would, and I said this during the campaign, so I'm not ducking anything, I would only appoint to the Supreme Court, I would only appoint to any position of responsibility in the United States government where it was in my responsibility to do so, individuals who believed in and accepted the principles of the Declaration of Independence on which this nation was founded. And I find it difficult to believe that you will accept the principle that the Creator gave us rights when you deny the principle that the Creator exists.
I think I understand the answer. Correct me if I'm wrong. You would disqualify an atheist from being appointed to the Supreme Court, thereby violating the text of the Constitution, which says that no religious test shall ever be required for holding public office in the United States. And wait a minute, I'm not finished. And you have the nerve to suggest that I would be denying your civil rights by allowing two gay men to engage in homosexual conduct in the privacy of their home? What right do you have to prevent that from happening just because you're offended by it? What a turnabout. My God, this gives sophistry a new name.
You know, what's interesting, two things are true. First of all, Mr. Dershowitz, I invoke no sectarian religious principle whatsoever. But I will stand here before the face of America and the world, and I will say unequivocally, without fear of any consequences, that I will stand and fall and die for the principles of the Declaration, even as our ancestors did. And that I will, as they did, draw the line against those who will try to deprive me of its protections.
Even if the Constitution...
You had your say. Now, and second, with respect to the business of homosexuality, you know what's interesting about this? He stands here and pretends that what is at issue in our society now is what people do in the privacy of their bedrooms, and you know that's a lie. You know, when you tell the Boy Scouts that they have to have homosexual scoutmasters, you're not talking about what goes on in the privacy of somebody's bedroom.
Yes, you are.
You are talking about what will be imposed as a matter of law upon the consciences of those whose religious beliefs cannot abide the practice. And that is not a matter of private morality. That is a matter of public right guaranteed by the First Amendment, which states clearly you're not supposed to interfere. Not with, by the way, with beliefs. All these folks like to pretend that the First Amendment is about what you believe and what your opinion is and all of this sort of stuff. No, it's not. It says the free exercise of religion. Last time I looked, exercise meant action and activity. Sitting around thinking about running around the track is not exercise.
You have it
It's
exactly
exercise when you go out
backwards.
and do it.
You have it exactly backwards.
Therefore, what he's trying to tell us is that his rubric, which now seeks to use the rubric of civil rights to dictate the moral conscience of every individual in America, to remove from the purview of moral judgment activities that have been essential to the meaning of ethics and moral judgment from time immemorial, and now trampling on what have been the sacred rights of our heritage from long before the Constitution was written. You will say that you are going to dictate how I shall, before my God, respond to those requirements of his will. That is precisely what I mean. He accuses me of speaking like Khomeini. I think you see him here acting like him.
Okay, my turn.